Stay tuned until the end to hear original poetry from Rabbi Posner.
Hi, this is Rabbi Daniel Graber, and you are listening to Bethelians, a podcast about those funny, great people of Bethel Synagogue. The last time you heard this podcast was in July of 2021. We took a bit of a hiatus. I want to say thank you to Jenna Highland, for producing some great episodes of Bethelians. The idea behind this podcast is that we are a community of 460 families now. That's a lot of people. In a few weeks, we're going to be gathering here at 1004 Watt Street, and we're going to be together on the high holidays. But even in those moments when we try to gather as many people as possible together from our community, it's still hard to get to know each other. There's still only a few people who you can have a really good conversation with. And I think one of the most important parts about community is that we get to know each other. And I think a podcast can be a great way for us to get to know Bethelians, to get to know those different people who we are all in community with. And we thought that it would be a great idea after this small hiatus, a podcast sabbatical, if you will, something that's very dear to my heart, to begin our Bethelians Part 2 with our new associate rabbi. That is very fun to say, Rabbi and Dr. Rachel Posner. So wonderful to have you here.
It is a great blessing and joy to be here with you.
Yay. We're going to hear lots from you today, but why don't you start just by telling the community a little bit about your Jewish story?
Sure.
Who are you, Rabbi Rachel Posner?
Sure. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in suburban Pittsburgh. I was always like a really religious, I was like sort of a freaky religious kid. Just because I would say, I was speaking with someone about this week, that somebody asked me about believing in God. And I said, it's not so much that I believe in God. I'm skeptical of beliefs about God, but since I was a young child, I had experiences of God. I had just experiences that were not all the time, but every once in a while, a powerful spiritual experience, which I later came to associate with a feeling of God or something larger than myself. I remember being just before my bat mitzvah, so maybe 10 years old, and standing on the sidewalk walk in Squirrel Hill, which is, people who know Pittsburgh will know this Jewish area of Pittsburgh, which is tangential to this story. And being like feeling myself caught up in a ray of sunlight, and being alone and having this experience of both being in my body but also outside of my body and observing myself. And it was this a moment of both extreme self-consciousness, like, notice, who am I? Like, what does it mean that I'm alive in this moment? What needed to happen in order for me to get to this moment? And a feeling of awe. I didn't have the word for it at the time, but it was a feeling of awe.
And you were how old again?
Probably like 10.
Wow, amazing.
And so I didn't have the words to understand that experience, but I started seeking understanding of what that experience was. It was a deep emotional experience based on, like, nothing was happening, but I had the feeling that God was there.
So I'm curious, I want to know sort of how that manifested itself Jewishly. I think a lot of times, unfortunately, people, may go to synagogue and not feel like that's happening there. So
Sure. I was raised actually in a conservative Jewish home, belonged to actually Bethel, in Bethel Synagogue in Mount Lebanon in Pennsylvania. Haven't been back there in years. And my parents gave me a really beautiful Jewish upbringing, though they always described themselves as not religious, but I think their feeling about what it means to be religious is, has something to do maybe with belief or being Orthodox, which they're not. But we went to Hebrew school 3 times a week. My parents were not shul goers. We didn't go to shul on Saturday mornings, but we had Shabbos dinner. We kept the kosher home, and they were very involved in the Jewish community. but they didn't consider themselves religious because they weren't daveners. When they got married and they joined their books together, they realized that they had the same book from the same adult education class, which was on the Shulchan Aruch. They were both taking this class. They didn't meet in the class, but they had the same, text from anyway. So they had it in them.
You associate like the keeping kosher home or Hebrew school with that experience you had when you
No,
were
no.
in the sunlight?
No, and I also had a lot of really negative experiences in that could have sent me away from Judaism. So my bat mitzvah experience was very alienating. I didn't have a good or positive relationship with the rabbi of the synagogue or really any professional in the synagogue. So I didn't have like such a great connection, but there were moments of connection. And I would say the greatest moment for me was the Hebrew high school that I went to, which was called SAGIS, the School for Advanced Jewish Studies. It was in downtown Squirrel Hill. And so I lived in the suburbs, but we would get on a bus on Sunday mornings and we would all go and study in a community school with other teenagers. And this was a place the first place where I really was treated like a Jewish adult who had a responsibility to learn and who had something to offer in terms of Jewish learning and text. So I found it to be engaging where, to be honest, like the synagogue of my youth was not. It was actually pretty demoralizing. I hate to say it. I'm sorry. But it wasn't.
It's real.
It's real. But this was a place where I thought this was where I felt like, wow, Judaism has something to offer.
So I think there are two things going on there. I mean, one of them is unfortunately, if you've seen the movie A Serious Man, the Coen brothers,
Yes.
it paints this devastating portrait of sort of deadening conservative Judaism in Minneapolis, I think, in the like 1950s and 60s. I also think that like when you're working with kids who are 11, 12 years, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, you want to be engaging, but their minds are just beginning to develop. And there's something really critical about returning to study Judaism when you're an older teenager and when you're a young adult, because what you see is that Judaism isn't actually everything that you experienced when you were 12.
Right.
It grows with you.
Yes, I really agree with that. And also there were, I think, the ways that girls were educated even at that time were different from the opportunities that boys had. So as an example, I wasn't given an opportunity to read Torah on my bat mitzvah.
Oh wow.
And I saw that that boys in the class were, and that really alienated me.
Right.
And so, certain practices I think that we've changed now in conservative Judaism
help to make it more welcome.
Yes.
So, all right, there's a ray of sunshine and then there's some alienating experiences, and then there's there's a Hebrew high school experience which sort of plants within you this Judaism thing. There's some depth in this tradition, and so you continue sort of your Jewish journey, but then now you're a rabbi.
So what happened is then I went to college at University of Rochester, and I became a religion major. It was absolutely one of the greatest experiences of my life. Was a really formative intellectual experience in college. And I loved my professors. I studied world religions. And I went to study abroad in Jerusalem my junior year. That's where I met Jonathan, my husband. And I became more religious, as one does in college.
And in Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem. And, I began to think about, what am I going to do with my life? It's junior year. I'm going to graduate. I have to figure this out. I thought actually about being a Jewish studies professor, thought about being a rabbi, and I ended up applying to JTS to a pre-rabbinical program, like a mechina program to prepare you to get to rabbinical school.
JTS is the Jewish Theological Seminary. It is an important center of Jewish learning in the conservative movement at 122nd and Broadway in New York. Go ahead.
And after I graduated in the spring, it was like a week later, I showed up on the doorstep of JTS. I was like very motivated, and I enrolled in this program, and it was also a bit of a disillusioning experience, and not a great fit for me at that time. I didn't really get a lot of support. I was struggling to understand myself, where I fit in halachically. It was also at that time, there were folks who were closeted gay people at the seminary. There was a debate in my class about whether the women in the class we would daven together, we'd pray together twice a day, and we would pray as a class during mincha. And there was a debate about whether the women in the class could lead the service. And I was sort of flummoxed, and I didn't know how to even engage in the debate. And I felt like alienated again by that experience.
You're sort of saying, why are we talking about this? Why is this a question?
And I didn't at that time find thought partners to talk to about it, which I wish I had, but I didn't. And I dropped out because I felt like I don't feel like I fit in here. And but I knew I wanted to do something I thought, what do I want to do with my life? And vaguely, I knew that I wanted to help people, that needed to be a part of my professional identity, it seemed to me. I don't know where I got that sense, but that seemed important to me. So I got a job. I started working at an agency that served people with disabilities in the Bronx. And this was this was my first job. I worked there for 3 years, and it was a great job because I said this to Madeline actually, that it was similar to your job in that
Madeline is here in the office, by the way. Say hi, Madeline. Okay. If you're listening on audio, we just pointed the video at her.
Anyway, so
she's helping us.
She's helping us a lot. So anyway, this was a job where it was a small, scrappy organization, and you just had to do anything. You just got in there and you helped out in whatever way you could. And so I did a lot of different things. And the thing that I loved most was we were storefront, and sometimes people with mental illness or would come in and sort of wander in, and I'd sit and talk to them. And I wasn't really doing counseling, but it was like I could see what counseling might be like. And I loved hearing people's stories, and I loved that, in fact, I loved the idea of figuring out how I might be of help to particularly to people with mental illness. So I started taking night classes at Hunter College in psychology so that I could apply for a doctorate and become a therapist. And that's what I did. And and so I'm fast forwarding because, it's a long story, but essentially I got a PhD at NYU, and I became a clinical psychologist and a psychotherapist. And I worked for 15 years in a psychotherapy practice. Mostly in the beginning, I worked with kids and families and adolescents. And then I transitioned to now I work more with adults and couples. And that is up to the point. And then the story shifts. So then the question is, what brought me back to becoming a rabbi?
And I'll say a couple of things on this podcast. I also just want to clarify that your position at Bethel is 2/3 time.
Yes.
Right? And you continue a small therapy practice as well. So it's not like you've, left that entire world behind. So you tell everyone a little bit about what brought you back and wanting to study to be a rabbi, and also a little bit about your journey to Durham.
Sure.
It's been 4 years, is that right? Yeah.
So, the first thing I'll say is that there's these two disciplines, if we can call them that, are really very, even though my jobs are separate, right? When I'm a rabbi, I'm not a therapist. When I'm a therapist, I'm not a rabbi. But there's so much interplay between the skill sets, but the goals are different, right? So, but how I got there is that there were some limitations in my role as a therapist. And I felt like there was a missing piece, and I kept I think, people talk about calling, and I really relate to that idea because I really very much felt called to to become a rabbi. Like it wasn't, it wasn't like a easy path or like an obvious path, although it kept making itself obvious to me. So, I continued my Jewish learning, and that was really, really enriching for me. And I enjoyed I did a lot of learning at the synagogues that I participated in, and I did every time there was like a retreat or a seminar or something, I would sign up for it. And then I had a friend who is a rabbi, and she said, she graduated from HUC, the Hebrew Union College Reform School, and she said in New York, there's a program that I think you would be interested in. It's training to be a spiritual director. I'd never heard of that. What's a spiritual director? Turns out it's a person who sits with an individual to guide them on their path, to help them understand their relationship to God, their relationship to the divine, or to something, however they define that, as something larger than themselves that connects them to other people or to the earth. So um, I thought this could be really great. So I applied for this program. I was accepted, and I was the only non-clergy person in the program. And it was an incredible 2-year training program. And I thought, this is great. This will satisfy my sort of desire to, be involved to my religious outlets, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, it just made me want more to be a rabbi. As I became friends with rabbis and cantors and learned what they did, I said I want more of that. And then I applied to rabbinical school, and I was blessed to be a student at the Academy for Jewish Religion in New York, which is a pluralistic school.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask,
Yeah.
will you tell everybody just a little, couple words about the program itself?
Sure. It's actually, I would say it's not, I wouldn't describe it as remote. I'd describe it as low residency.
Okay.
Because most of our classes are on Zoom, but we gather together twice a year in person. And those meetings in person are very important for solidifying yourself as part of a community. But what's nice about being on Zoom is that we have at AJR people from all over the world who study together, all different types of backgrounds. And it's a great place for people who might be called to be Jewish clergy, but can't stop they're usually in like their second or third career, and they can't stop their life in order to move to New York or Los Angeles, or to move to Israel for a year. Many rabbinical schools have a requirement of spending a year in Israel, and which is phenomenal. Some people can't do it
right.
So I would say that one thing that really distinguishes AJR is not so much that it's on Zoom, but that it is pluralistic. So this idea that people from many different streams of Judaism are studying together, and rather than tolerating each other's differences, we try to find a way to cherish the differences.
So you're in rabbinical school, mm-hmm. and then you come to Durham. So tell us a little bit about Durham and how you found Bethel.
Sure. Jonathan had an amazing job opportunity at Duke. My husband works in the psychiatry department at Duke, and so we moved for his job. And how I got to Bethel? Well, I remember actually calling you up, and I don't know if you remember this. You don't. And the first phone call that we had, I don't even remember what the purpose of the phone call. I just called to like connect and say, we knew that we wanted to live near Bethel. Like we had scoped it out. Actually, it really had to do with Adam Levine.
Okay.
Because
Adam, you're listening.
Yes, Adam was the first person I spoke to when we thought we might move to Durham.
And Adam also is from...
He's from West...
Yeah. Who is Adam?
Oh, thank you, Madeline. So
yeah,
Adam,
okay.
For those who don't know Adam Levine, he is one of the founders of the Chavurah Minyan. He coordinates all of our Torah reading. He's a professor of math at Duke and also publishes crossword puzzles in the New York Times. Mm-hmm. And then also he went to the same synagogue as you guys were at in Westchester. Is that right?
He grew up at Bet Am Shalom We weren't at Bet Am at the same time. His parents are friends of ours and attend Bet Am Shalom Synagogue. So I knew him. Actually, when I mentioned to his parents, Terry and Eric, about thinking about moving to Durham, they said, you've got to talk to Adam. And he was just incredibly, as he always is, very generous and warm, and described the community very well. And, I just knew knew it would be the right fit. And his father said, this is the place for you, and I trust him. So he knew. Anyway, so I called you up, and you were actually you were walking Delilah, your dog.
A blessed memory. Yes, miss you, Delilah.
He said, "I'd be happy to talk, but I just have to walk my dog while we're talking." So anyway, I remember that. And so it was pretty much. It wasn't there wasn't so much shul shopping. It seemed pretty
just
much,
made sense. It was a good fit.
Made sense.
Good fit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, let me ask you a couple of rapid fire questions.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So let's go with favorite Jewish holiday and why.
My favorite Jewish holiday is Shabbat. Which you're gonna, and I would say it is.
Rabbi loves Shabbat. Newsflash. Okay, yes. So tell us why.
Because I'm very interested in creativity, my own creative process, as well as that of other people. There's this idea that Shabbat actually helps in our creativity, because we have to stop being creative and put a pause on it in order to remember why we wanted to be creative or needed to be creative in the first place. So if we're just creating, and we never stop and we never pause, first of all, we get burnt out. And second of all, we lose sight of why we're doing all of this. So I think that the idea of Shabbat is one of the Torah's greatest innovations. The idea that we as humans we're valued, and we should value ourselves and others, not just for our productivity, but just for being. So Shabbat gives us that opportunity to just be.
One of the things I'm thinking about is a lot of times people misunderstand that Shabbat is about rest. And, I love a good nap, as most people in this. It is about having just taking a physical rest. But what is forbidden by the rabbis on Shabbat is something called melacha. And melacha is creative labor.
That's right.
That idea that actually on Shabbat you're stopping your creative process. For me, I do this on Shabbat, but for me, this also happens when I'm swimming or when I'm running.
Yes.
Where I'm just sort of doing other activities where I can't do anything else except for just be. And it's in those moments that I can sort of feel creativity emerging from that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You need both, right? You need both. Yeah. Philosophically, I think Shabbat is gorgeous. And I also find just the idea that it comes with such regularity, that we have this opportunity every week. And it's right there for us, but we have to choose to make it. One of the things I really feel called to do as a rabbi is help people figure out how Jewish practice is accessible to them. Because it can feel very overwhelming, especially for parents with young children. How do you make Shabbat, right? And so figuring out, where do you start?
We in this first month and a half or so, we sat down and sort of figured out, who's going to be doing what, and how do we share responsibilities. And you're going to focus on the Talmud Torah and on education with our Talmud Torah parents. So, what do you say to them in terms of, how do you do Shabbat for the first time? How do you take a step in that respect?
People are in all different places, right? And so I'd want to hear what their practices, because many people already have practices. So I like to start with figuring out what's low-hanging fruit, right? And offering some ideas of what practices are. There's so many different things. I don't even know where to start. Setting aside Friday night as a time for family dinner. And then, as soon as you're doing that, it's easy to think about, you can make that holier by lighting candles, saying a blessing. Even if you don't have Hebrew, you could say the blessing in English. And then you work towards perhaps saying it in Hebrew. So taking a practice and then building on that practice. That you might find a way to bring in Shabbat, but also bring your family back together on Saturday evening to say goodbye to Shabbat. And let's say you're not able to do it exactly at the time that is, halakhically determined. Okay, can you do it earlier or later and start with that?
Havdalah, I think, is an amazing ceremony because it's got those elements,
Right.
right? You have fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have the smells, and it's very exciting for kids. And at our house, we have a plate where we've dripped we call it Wax Mountain, where we've dripped the wax from all of the Havdalah candles. And it's now like 25 years. It's pretty like amazing. I think sometimes we are our own worst critics. We sort of say to ourselves, if I'm not doing the whole thing, then I'm an imposter.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yes. And that's not true. And right. Or here's another great example. I was working on this with a psychotherapy client. People feel that because they're not Orthodox, they don't have a right to shut off their phone on Shabbat. And but you can say to your boss, or like, I observe Shabbat, and I can't be contacted. And you can put a vacation response, whatever responder you want, and give yourself permission that it doesn't, like, even if you're not coming to shul, right? That you don't have to come to shul in order to institute like what people call now like tech Shabbat, right?
Tech Shabbat.
And that's a thing that now people outside of Judaism has started to take on, but give yourself permission to, as you say, take these things on.
And tech Shabbat, I think, is, part of what that ends up doing. You were talking about how you moved, you really wanted to live close to the synagogue. And I think part of what that does is it roots you where you are.
That's right.
Right. And I think phones, just by virtue of what they are taking you somewhere else. You can be right there with someone else. We've all seen those pictures.
Right. And that's why Shabbat is, it's amazing that mindfulness has become such a big and important practice for so many people inside and outside of Judaism. But Shabbat was the original mindfulness practice.
Yeah. We had it first.
But like that you're like you said, you're in the here and now.
All right, so slightly different, not your favorite Jewish holiday, but I want you to pick a favorite Jewish tradition.
Okay.
A favorite Jewish tradition, and why?
All right, so I would say the rabbi said, Elu ve'elu dvarim Elohim chaim, right? That these and these are the words of the living God. The idea that we in Judaism, we are also the originators of both and, of like, we hold on to multiple perspectives. And I think that is so needed today. And that is, you can say I don't think it's a philosophy. I actually think it's a tradition, because you see it in the Talmud and you see it as a through line in Jewish tradition. We preserve the, Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. We preserve the minority opinions, and we don't necessarily wrap things up into a tidy and neat bow and say, this is our tradition.
You are a rabbi. You are also a parent. You're going to be working with a lot of parents. And can you think of a moment where Judaism has specifically informed your parenting?
Yeah, I think that a guiding principle for me is we learn in Torah that we are created B'Tselem Elohim. We're created in the image of God. And because of that, to me, that's also connected to the idea that God loves us exactly as we are. And I think that what has happened in many pockets of our society is that kids get taught inadvertently, for good reason sometimes, that what's important is the grade you got on the test. What's important is the college that you got into. What's important is, did you make the team? And I think we really need to fight against that as parents and teachers, to teach our kids and explicitly tell them, you are loved exactly as you are, and just for being alive. Just for the fact that you're a human being.
And I like the way that you put that, which is parents don't mean that, right? But sometimes what kids are hearing is that message, and in order to, part of what we need to do is explicitly counter that message. And Judaism in that respect can be very countercultural.
Right.
So a couple of other things. first of all, thank you very much for covering for me while I was on sabbatical.
You're welcome.
It was an amazing and much needed experience for me. I'm sort of curious, during that time you also were ordained as a rabbi, pretty amazingly. What were some of the highlights of that time, and what were challenges and sort of things that you learned during the
Mm-hmm.
first 6 months of 2025?
Wow, I really appreciate that question. And in some ways, I feel like I almost haven't had time to reflect on it, right? Because
It's happening right here
it's
on the podcast. Here we are, you're in the rabbi study.
okay. So what I would say is it was an incredible opportunity of jumping in off the deep end. Like it was an incredibly steep learning curve because there was so much preparation required. This community is, extraordinary. It's an extraordinary community,
Yeah.
and we were talking at the board meeting about, building profound community. I mean, I just think we like, there's something very profound about this place. I think people were very kind and accepting, and I didn't feel like a pressure to be you. I felt a lot of help and support. The hard thing was like the volume, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's an all-encompassing job.
And a highlight?
It's really interesting. So many people have been so kind and saying, wow, like you had a lot of funerals and that must have been so hard. But it was actually like a huge highlight because I think one of the reasons we become rabbis is to accompany people in joy and sadness. And in those moments, like there are these pivotal moments in people's lives. And when you can be there as a rabbi or spiritual companion or friend in those moments, it's really, really holy. Like there's sort of like this, I feel like, life kind of moves on, but there are these like windows where you can like have a window into something really deep in someone's life that you have an opportunity to make an impact or just to be there as a witness. That is very powerful. Yeah.
Well, I will say, upon returning, I was not surprised, and I was incredibly grateful to hear from so many people how supportive and helpful and cared for um, so many people in our community felt from your care during those very tender moments, and to be able to leave the community. When I think about my sabbatical, I enjoyed that time away and treasured it. And I think one of the hardest parts for me was not being able to be there,
Yes, I
um,
understand that. Yeah.
and to know that that you were there and able to steward people through those moments is something I'm very grateful for. So I want to finish our conversation. I mean, I have many questions, but we could go on for a long time, and I don't know if anybody's going to be listening to the end of our first podcast return. You something you touched a little bit in terms of Shabbat on your impulse to creativity, and you've written and published poetry, and I think we're going to include in the show notes a link to your blog on the Times of Israel website with some more of those poems. I would just love for you to share a little bit about that creative impulse, and also to finish by reading us a poem today and maybe saying a word about it.
Sure.
And to
Um,
be clear, I'm not springing this on her. This you knew was coming
yeah.
beforehand.
I think that, you know, I, I do believe we're all creative. I think we have to find our means of creativity, and mine, I really like creating with words. My father is an artist. He creates paintings. My brother is a musician. So I think I come from a family that really values creativity and sees it as an important life force. I really love to read poetry and I love to write poetry.
Perhaps there is something about 1004 Watt Street,
Hmm.
something in the air here about rabbis and poetry.
Oh,
I think we
Rabbi.
both are thinking about Rabbi Steve Sager, Alav
Mm,
Hashalom,
mm, mm.
and how much his teaching
Yeah.
informs this place. So,
Yes.
why don't you share this poem and tell
Sure.
us the title and
Sure.
share it with us in your voice, and Maybe if you can just tell us a word about it, either before or after.
So I don't only write religious poems. I write poems about whatever, many different things, but I did bring something. I brought a theological poem because I think sometimes poetry can, like any other art form, can be helpful in working through our questions about, or our beliefs or thoughts about who God is, what God is. So this poem is called If You Want Me. Listen, said God. I am so sick of trying to get your attention. I'm done with your dark moods, your excuses. If you want me, I'll be in the bar. Also, God said, you know I love you. I won't give up on you. Listen, said God, and please look at me when you listen. I'm a more perfect mirror than any man. If you want me, turn your face towards your children. Put your hands in the dirt. Run until you can't breathe. Fry some velvety slices of eggplant. Eat them with minty tomato sauce. Eat them slowly. When you talk to me, God said, I always answer you, but someone else's voice always drowns me out. Honestly, it's kind of annoying. If you want me, be soft. I am right here, underneath your breath, breathing you. So that is a poem. I like to play with the idea about different relationships and different conversations that we might have with God that get us out of our stuckness about like what God is.
Thank you very much. I'm going to finish just by saying one other thing. As I was listening to that poem, it's a gift in so many ways. One of them is hearing God's voice as a woman and hearing that in your voice.
That's funny because
right?
in my, it's not, although I actually have other ones
where you've written it specifically.
I don't hear it as a woman's voice here, but I can see how you might. Somebody else might.
Right. Well, and I was just saying, literally, as you're reading it, right? You are reading God's voice, and you're reading it, and you are a woman. And I'm grateful that you are Bethel's associate rabbi for many reasons. You are a wonderful rabbi. You're a wonderful person, etc. And you are a woman, and I think that one of the things that we have tried to create at Bethel is to give people different ways into the Jewish tradition, and I think that there is something powerful about having somebody who is a woman part of our community of teaching and sort of lifting that up.
I agree, and actually that right. I think I am the first person who's female serving as clergy at Bethel. That's pretty cool.
Something amazing to celebrate. Well, thank you. Again, I'm just going to remind everybody that Bethelians is a podcast about lots of great people here at Bethel. It's a way for us to get to know one another, and we look forward to having more episodes this fall. If you're interested in being on the Bethel podcast, then you can contact Madeline in our office. And I think we're going to finish with a few announcements. And for now, I will say Lihitraot from 1004 Watt Street. Lihitraot means we will see you again soon. And we look forward to seeing you at Bethel sometime soon.
Lihitraot.
Thanks for listening to Bethelians. We hope to see you at services, which are every Shabbat morning at 9:30 a.m. And for those with little ones, Shabbat childcare starts at 10 a.m. If you'd like to be featured on the podcast, please reach out to programs@betheldurham.org. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, Lihitraot.